Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So in this episode of the skirt edit, I'm going to show you how to finalize your panel skirt patterns. So this video is going to be a speed through of me drafting the pattern, but I will link my more in-depth video below if you want to draft yours from the beginning. So to start, I traced around my skirt block and I marked in all my pattern information. So now I'm going to choose the length of my skirt. So for this sample, I decided to go a little shorter, just above the knee. But again, you can choose your own length for the skirt. So now we need to decide how wide we want the panels to be. So I chose to do my panel on the back, starting at that dart closest to the side seam, and this will give me a nice decent centerpiece panel. So on the front pattern, I measured in the same distance from my side seam so that the side panels on both the front and the back will be the same size. Okay, so you're going to notice here that I'm moving that dart into that new line, and the reason for that is these are going to be separate pieces. So that lone dart is going to be hidden in the seam of the panel, so there'll be no darts in the front. So using a new sheet, we're going to trace out all the pattern pieces. So you're going to actually have 4 separate pieces for this pattern. So you'll have the back side seam and then the center back. Then you're going to have a front side seam and then a center front. So make sure that you mark in all your information as you go so you don't mix up any of the pieces. So now it's time to add seam allowance. So for the back side seam pattern piece, you're going to be adding 1 centimeter seam allowance to the waist and both of the side seams. And then for the hem, I'm going to be adding 4 centimeters, but this all depends on your preference. So for the back center pattern piece, I'm going to be adding 1 centimeter seam allowance to the waist and the side seams, but we're going to leave that center back line on the fold. And again, I'm adding the 4 centimeters to the hem. So for the front side pattern piece, like the back, you're going to be adding 1 centimeter to the waist and both side seams, as well as your hem allowance. And lastly, for the center front pattern piece, you're going to add 1 centimeter seam allowance to the waist side seam, and then again adding your hem allowance. But as well, like the back, you're going to leave that center front line on the fold. So at this point, you can go ahead and cut out your pattern pieces, and again, don't forget to punch in your notches. So now I'm going to be drafting a simple straight waistband. Again, I have a more in-depth tutorial for this, which I will also link. But for the waistband, I'm going to be doing it about 4 centimeters wide. But again, you can play around with this and try out different widths. The choice is yours. So for seam allowance, you're going to be adding 1 centimeter seam allowance around the whole waistband pattern. So when you've a cutout, don't forget to mark in all your information and then punch in your notches, because these are very important. The last thing we need to do is make a lining pattern. So for this, we're going to be reducing the length of the skirt further, and this is just because it's nice to have the lining shorter than the actual length of the skirt. So now we need to trace out the patterns. This time we won't be separating the pieces. Instead, we're going to have a full front and a full back piece. So for the front lining, you're going to add 1 centimetre seam allowance to the side seams and the waist, and then add in your hem allowance. Again, I just went with 4 centimetres, but this all depends on your choice. And again, we're going to keep the centre front line on the fold. So on the back pattern, again, 1 centimetre seam allowance on the side seams and the waist, and then leave the centre on the fold, and then add your hem allowance. One thing that I did forget to do was to mark in where we're going to put a zip. So for this video, the zip is actually going to be in the side seam of the skirt. So going back to the original pattern, I'm going to measure the length of the zip down along the side seam. But again, remember that we're adding a waistband. So we need to take into account the width of the waistband as we're measuring down the side of the skirt. So for this skirt, I'm going to go with a 10-inch zip, but again, you can go with a longer one if that's what you want. Okay, so now we need to add notches for the zip on both the front and the back side seam patterns, as well as your lining patterns. Okay, so now go ahead and make sure that all your patterns have their notches and all of their information is correct before you finish. And that is it. So now your patterns are finalised and ready to be cut out and sewn up, which is exactly what we're going to do in the next video. So I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please hit that like button as it really helps support my channel. And if you'd like to see more pattern and sewing tutorials, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!